welcome to Broken Entertainment. So, I'm going to do a video in the next couple of days talking about the expansion of the channel, where I want to kind of take things down the road. I'm going to broaden the focus a little bit, bring in some more writing videos, that kind of thing. So, we'll get into that in detail another time, but this is kind of a part of that. This is a writing video. It's not on Sunday. And it's not an accident. I'm just doing a writing video. So today I really want to get into villains, and more specifically my philosophy on villains. So this is just one example of many. This is a website called masterclass.com, and it talks about the 8 villain archetypes. And I really think you can boil that down to 2 major categories. There's the villain who is a villain for reasons that make sense. They are sympathetic. They can develop over time. They might even have redemption arcs and so on. And then there's the guy that's just evil. One example being Darth Vader in the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, because that's all we know about him. We don't know anything else yet. And he's just evil. Emperor Palpatine, another good example. And, Sauron in The Lord of the Rings, if you want to go back farther. And the thing about these characters is a lot of people get tired of the villain that is just a villain. They're the mustache twirling, cat stroking, evil doer who does evil because they do. And I think it's a mistake to throw that out. Now, I don't use it as an emphasis. Now, sometimes I do use it, and there may be a time when I use it as a main villain. Probably not, but I do use them. And I think they have a role. They have different roles, really. They have the ability to show us a direct contrast to the main character, pitting their heroism versus the evil nature of the villain. And they allow us to play around with what it means to be evil, what the concept of just absolute evil is. And, if you had to encounter something like that, if you took a character and you put them in this situation where, they're up against pure evil, and how do you really respond to pure evil? Because with a sympathetic villain, a hero might overcome them by kind of talking them down, right? Or by eventually manipulating their emotions, or by showing them that they're wrong, that kind of thing. But with that kind of villain, with the pure evil for evil's sake person, how do you compete against that? Now, obviously there's direct conflict, and that's eventually where you're going to have to go narratively. But when you're fighting it and you're showing the character struggle, you can have some really good moments with the main character where they're like, how do you come to grips with something like that? With something that's evil, is aware of its evil, and just doesn't care. They're just evil, and that's the way they are. They know they're doing bad things, and they don't really care. In human history, we don't have a lot of figures like this, because even somebody like Adolf Hitler had what they thought were reasons, and explained away what they did. Now, whether that actually explained anything or not is a totally different story. But they would excuse, obfuscate, come up with the, reasons they thought they were doing the right thing. But pure evil, like a Sauron or an early Darth Vader, is just evil. And, they don't care. They're not going to explain it away. They're not going to give you excuses. They're not going to say, well, you see, all these people that I put through these horrible things were bad, you see, so that's why I did it, so that they would learn from their mistakes, if you're a Saw fan. But when you've got this pure evil, this evil that doesn't care, that has no explanation, a normal character can really struggle to comprehend and come to terms with that, just as we would in real life. If you went up against something and it didn't even care enough to explain itself, it was simply doing that because it could. How do you come to grips with that? How do you grapple with something that is outside of human nature? Because human nature is to explain things to ourselves. And that goes for people who do evil things. You know, you find an excuse, you find an explanation, and you convince yourself in your justification. But to be evil for evil's sake is outside of human understanding. It's outside of human reality. And now you can either leave that alone and do nothing, and your readers might roll their eyes and be like, great. Or you can use that to show the character struggling and trying to understand the innate alien quality of this being. And you can even use it to show a character who is a villain is distinctly not human. You know, perhaps in their mind, there is no need to excuse what they do. And that gives you a level of inhumanity that you can play with. And one of the races in my science fantasy setting is like that. They are wholly and completely evil on a macroscopic scale. Now, there are more complicated characters than that when you get down on the smaller levels. But generally speaking, you have this, and that's a trope, right? The holy evil race. You have orcs or what have you as examples of that. Now, this race is more complicated than that. As I said, you have examples outside of the norm, but this is how people view them. And they do it with good reason. And the aliens themselves will tell you they don't have a morality. They don't try to explain away their behavior. It simply is who they are, and they don't see a need to excuse it. And it's part of what I use to make them alien, but I also use them to kind of grapple with this concept of is there such a thing as innate native goodness and innate native evil? And, you know, can you talk about morality in the sense of a species-wide genetic trait? Or is this something that is purely learned? And that's kind of what I use them to grapple with, rather than just having them be there for the sake of existing and having this evil race where it's like, okay, well, you know these people are good because they're fighting these people who are bad. You know, again, to use the example of orcs, dark elves, what have you, before D&D got all weird. The other type of villain is this sympathetic villain. This is a person who's doing something and they may not think it's evil at all. They may think it's good. And they may have justifiable, in their mind, reasons for doing these things. And that's where you find most of human reality. If you look at human history and you look at your Hitlers, your Maos, your Stalins, your Lenins, to say nothing of your Genghis Khans, and so on. When they did what they did not see themselves as evil. They saw themselves on the right side. And they had all manner of excuses to explain what they were doing. Mao was liberating the people. You know, we all know Hitler's famous excuses. And these characters appeal to people on a broad scale because they're very interesting. You look at them and you see humanity. You see the complexity of life. You see a person who might be motivated to do things, but maybe the things that they do are bad, but their motivation you can kind of understand. And I use this a lot as well. And really it's what I use for a main villain, if that's what you want to call it. The main villain in Shadow Empire in its series is doing things that they think are going to bring about a new, more equitable, more just world in which people are elevated out of their horror that they live through as peasants, serfs, slaves by the reintroduction of magic. And they're not afraid of what it's going to do to the environment. They're not afraid of not paying for magic the way it has to be in this setting. Because in this setting, when you cast magic, you also must return that energy to the world in form of life energy. But whether that's a little bit of blood or, killing people, that kind of depends on what's going on. This person is willing to do whatever it takes to bring this about. They understand that a lot of people will get killed in the process, but to them, it's better than the alternative. Because this person came from a horrible situation. This person saw family members die. This person saw the world around them as a horrible place where even the basic necessities of life were scarce. And yet, here's this overwhelming ability to fix all of that. But to do that, they have to struggle with a world that does not want magic back because of the damage it did last time it was used. And to them, it doesn't matter if the world is damaged because you can overcome that damage. You can unite people against that damage. And if you have to suffer some damage along the way, if people have to die along the way, if cities burn along the way, it's done to produce a better, more beautiful world in the long run. And I have another villain in my science fantasy series who is a main villain, certainly for one book. And she is doing the things that she does for the preservation of the future of her species. And it's the task that she's been assigned. This is what she was raised to do. And a long time ago, she'd already cut out this idea that, yes, you're going to do these things, and people are going to die as a result. People will suffer. People could be tortured or worse. And she doesn't care, not because she's purely evil, but because she wants to do whatever it takes. Any cost is worth paying so long as the species continues into the future. This allows for complex personalities, diverse character traits, people that might even occasionally regret what they're doing. And that's where people really start to fall in love with a lot of villains, but not always. Sometimes, Darth Vader was loved in the first movie before you ever found out he had sympathetic attributes. And by using a combination of the two, you're able to address things. You're able to play with the narrative, expand the characters in the narrative, because they might be struggling against this greater villain that is sympathetic, and they might even understand on some level, and they might try to approach on some level like, if we could just sit down and talk. And then you can do a lot with that and play on the emotions of both characters. But then you also have them struggling against somebody who is horrible, admits they're horrible, and doesn't care. And it allows you to make this villain that is inherently alien in every possible way to how humans understand reality. And so I often use those in tandem. And in my science fantasy series, the evil, pure evil villain, which is not the main villain. That character is used to show the main character and others around them that their belief that these invading aliens are monsters might be misguided. Because they see the things that they have done in the process of occupying the planet as evil. Justifiably so in some cases. And they're struggling against them for their lives, and they do the natural thing when you're fighting an enemy, which is to dehumanize them, which is easier, of course, when they're alien. And they view them as monsters. Oh, these people are monsters. They're just here to kill and butcher and enslave. And they never stop to think about where that perspective comes from. And then all of a sudden, they're dealing with another version of this species that is a monster. And now they get to look at things and understand things from a different perspective and begin to see, these people that have invaded are doing things that we think are bad. But they have reasons. They have beliefs behind what they're doing. And we can kind of understand them on some levels where they feel innately human. But this other species, there is no sympathy, there is no connectability there. Because they're willing to do anything and could do anything and don't care. And that makes the characters struggle with this concept of, are we fighting people who are monsters, or are we fighting people who simply are on the other side? And that is a conflict that is sort of central to warfare. And our history of warfare is, you have soldiers. In World War I is a great example. I forget the name of the exact location or the exact year, but there's that famous instance where it's on Christmas, and for the first and only time in the war, all the soldiers put down their guns and meet in no man's land and share in Christmas. And it's because though they've made each other out to be horrible villains, they realize that there is an innate connectivity there. There are shared values, there's shared culture, there's shared beliefs on some level. Or even if it's not shared, they're beliefs that they can kind of get together and understand on some level. Like, they might believe things a little bit differently, but you can kind of see where they're coming from. And to put ourselves in the situation of killing other people in war, we have to see them as inhuman. Most people. And that's what's going on here in this book, is that people are, and it's a theme of the series in general, people struggling on both sides with how they feel about the other side. Because the invading aliens just don't understand why humans won't just cooperate. We're here, we already won the war, why don't you just move along to get along and let's be done with this? Whereas the humans, being humans, are incredibly stubborn and want to fight for their culture and their values and their beliefs. And you end up with both sides viewing the other side as either a monster or unreasonably stubborn and ridiculous. And so that's why I've used in that series that secondary villain that is purely evil, because then it gives the character something to rebound off of. Where they're going, oh man, these aliens are totally evil. And then they come up against this guy and they're like, maybe they're not. That guy is, but these people fight those people because of what they do. These people are willing to enslave everybody at the drop of a hat, or murder people, or do literally anything, and these people draw a line at those points. So the main character reaches a position by the end of the story that is different from the position they started out with. And it plays a pivotal role in how the story unfolds. And I'm able to play with that by having these two villains. Rather than saying, well, evil for evil's sake is totally worthless and a stupid trope, you can play with these tropes and use them for different purposes rather than simply sticking them in the story because you think you need to, or simply ignoring them because you think you need to. I don't want to give a whole lot away about my fantasy series yet, but there are characters in that as well that kind of fit into this role for different reasons, different purposes. But and it's one way also to just make somebody truly alien is to give them a belief system so radically different from what we understand as humans, where the things we would call evil to them are just things. They're just events. They're just things that happen or things that you do, and oh well. So that's my take on it. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you like the video, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing, hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you next time.